Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a pile of information and distill it into something truly insightful. Today, we're unraveling a truly perplexing and, well, tragic case that has captivated and frustrated a nation. The mysterious death of Phoebe Handsjuk. Our sources for this deep dive come directly from a website dedicated to uncovering the truth about Phoebe's death. It features powerful accounts from her family, particularly her grandfather, Lorne Campbell, alongside references to broader media attention like the Phoebe's Fall podcast.
And our mission today really is to thoroughly explore the official findings of the coronial inquest into Phoebe's death, and then crucially to lay out the compelling counterarguments and unanswered questions raised by her family. By the end of this deep dive, you should have a pretty comprehensive understanding of the controversies, the evidence, and frankly, the enduring mysteries that surround this very unique case.
Okay, so let's dive into the core of what happened. We begin on December 2, 2010, in Melbourne, Australia. 24-year-old Phoebe Handsjuk was found dead in the refuse compactor room at the bottom of the Valencia, a luxury high-rise apartment building. It was discovered she had fallen feet first from the 12th floor refuse room down the waste disposal shaft. Now, this cause of death, apparently there were no known reported incidents like this in Australia's history. Quite remarkable, really.
Indeed, and what's more, the toxicology report revealed a blood alcohol reading of 0.16% and high levels of prescription drugs in Phoebe's system, specifically Stilnox or Zolpidem.
Oh.
And just 5 days later, homicide detectives stated they believed no second party was involved. They concluded that Phoebe had entered the chute feet first voluntarily. The police brief was then passed to a detective for the coroner.
But almost immediately, Phoebe's grandfather, retired Detective Sergeant Lorne Campbell, he harbored deep suspicions about this conclusion. Why was he so immediately skeptical, given the police findings?
Well, as a former detective himself, Campbell felt there were just too many unexplained mysteries. It didn't sit right with him. He began his own inquiries, and for over 2 years, he worked alongside Senior Detective Brendan Payne, trying to piece together what they saw as inconsistencies.
Right.
And this eventually led the family to request an open coronial inquest. They were hoping for cross-examination of witnesses to find some real answers.
So the inquest, that concluded in December 2014, with Coroner Peter White delivering his findings, and his central conclusion was, well, that Phoebe's death was an accident.
That's right. Coroner White found that, under the influence of Stilnox and alcohol, Phoebe climbed into the 12th floor garbage chute, while in a, quote, deeply confused and disoriented state, completely unaware of the danger. He specifically ruled out both suicide and any third-party involvement.
Okay.
The coroner stated Phoebe sustained only minor external injuries from the fall itself, and ultimately died from a severe injury caused by the compactor blade on the ground floor.
But for the family, this finding, it wasn't an end to their questions at all. In fact, it seems like it was the beginning of a whole new set of frustrations. Phoebe's mother, Natalie Handsjuk, publicly stated they did not agree with the principal aspect of the finding, expressing deep disappointment. And I understand the prohibitive costs prevented an appeal to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that's right. Appealing is incredibly expensive.
So the coroner's findings provided one conclusion, but the family, particularly Lorne Campbell, had a fundamentally different view. What were the core pillars of their challenge to his report? Let's unpack this.
Okay, to truly grasp the family's perspective, we need to zero in on their specific points of contention. First, there's the coroner's theory that Phoebe climbed into the chute herself and somehow climbed down or retarded her fall by exerting lateral pressure on this, very narrow 530 millimeter diameter vertical shaft.
Right. That sounds extremely difficult physically.
Exactly. Campbell challenged this, noting the extreme difficulty. He pointed out photographs showing, quote, relatively little dirt on Phoebe's body or clothes, despite the fact that the shaft itself was apparently very dirty.
That immediately raises a flag, doesn't it? How could she brace herself or slow her descent if the shaft was so narrow and dirty and she was presumably disoriented?
Precisely. And what's fascinating here is a height discrepancy. The pathologist measured Phoebe at approximately 166 centimeters, but her actual height was 175 centimeters.
Oh, wow. That's a significant difference.
It is. The coroner accepted the lower measurement, which kind of supported his theory that she didn't just free fall. But Campbell explained that entering feet first into a narrow chute like that, it requires facing the wall with your arms sort of trailing behind you, which would immediately lead to an uncontrolled fall. You couldn't really brace yourself.
So the physics seemed questionable. What did the pathologist say?
Well, the pathologist, Dr. Lynch, he stated he had no view on whether it was a controlled fall. He said that pathology just didn't allow him to prefer one scenario over another.
Okay, and what about the idea of another person being involved? The coroner ruled that out completely, didn't he?
He did. The coroner positively eliminated any person, including Phoebe's boyfriend, Anthony Campbell, from complicity. But Campbell argued this finding was simply not supported by the evidence.
Why not? What was the evidence there?
Well, Campbell was home for nearly an hour before Phoebe was found. While he claimed computer usage as an alibi, the analyst couldn't confirm the duration of his use after logon.
Ah, so the alibi wasn't airtight.
Not entirely, and Campbell even conducted a videotaped experiment. He demonstrated it was actually quite easy for a reasonably strong male to carry a young woman of Phoebe's size and weight in an unconscious state over his shoulder and put her feet first into the chute.
That's quite a demonstration.
It is. He also noted evidence consistent with a physical altercation having taken place and no proof to the contrary. And pointed out that Campbell actually adjusted his evidence during the inquest.
Okay. And what about Phoebe's injuries themselves? Were they consistent with just an accidental fall down a chute?
Not entirely, according to Campbell. Phoebe had unexplained injuries to her head, a 1-centimeter abrasion and bruising on her right jaw, a subdural hemorrhage over the left side of her brain, and an adjacent abrasion above her left ear. These, Campbell argued, were consistent with a physical attack.
Okay.
There were also circular and ovoid bruises on her right medial upper arm, consistent with grip marks, and bruising to her left wrist and neck.
Grip marks, that's suggestive.
It certainly raises questions, and crucially, Dr. Lynch, the pathologist, stated in his autopsy report, and this is a direct quote, "I am not in a position to exclude the possibility of involvement of other parties."
Wow. So the pathologist couldn't rule out foul play.
Exactly. Which makes the coroner's positive elimination of third-party involvement seem, well, questionable to the family. This particular detail isn't just a procedural note. It really challenges the very premise of the coroner's findings when the pathologists themselves couldn't rule out external involvement.
So beyond the physical evidence and the coroner's specific findings, Lauren Campbell also scrutinized the initial investigation itself, uncovering what he believed were significant police failings. How did the initial investigation impact the outcome here?
Well, this isn't just a sort of laundry list of errors. It's a stark illustration of how crucial those early investigative steps are, and how their failure can leave a case just riddled with irresolvable questions, potentially obstructing justice for years. The coroner himself noted police omissions, like failing to immediately secure the CCTV hard drive, meaning much of it was just recorded over, lost evidence. They also didn't take the apartment's computers on the night of Phoebe's death.
So evidence was potentially lost right from the very beginning.
Precisely. Campbell's iMac, which Phoebe also used, wasn't taken for almost 4 months. And when it was finally analyzed years later by an apparently under-resourced police IS crime division, well, the results were poor and often inconclusive.
That's not good.
No. And Phoebe's iPhone and SIM card, they were handed to Campbell after what Campbell called an incomplete examination. And the SIM card later disappeared.
That's quite a series of missteps, especially with crucial electronic evidence like phones and computers.
It is. And perhaps most disturbingly, police actually prevented ambulance officers from checking Phoebe at the scene. They claimed it was a crime scene, which resulted in her not being medically checked for 9.5 hours.
9.5 hours.
Yes. Campbell passionately argued it was not beyond the realm of possibility that she was comatose, but not actually dead when found. Especially as there was evidence Phoebe had crawled around the dark compactor room after the fall.
Wow. So a person who might have still been alive was not given immediate medical attention because the scene was deemed a crime scene, only for it later to be ruled an accident by the coroner. That's a chilling thought.
Absolutely, and there were other issues too. Unexamined dirt marks in the 12th floor hallway, a defective buzz-up recording system for the building's lifts, which even had a 20-minute deactivation period during a fire alarm, allowing potentially undetected access.
So someone could have gotten up there without a record.
Potentially. A witness observed a tradesman entering the lift from the underground parking and pressing the 12th floor button. But this person denied visiting the floor later, and they weren't called to testify at the inquest.
It sounds like there were just a lot of avenues not fully explored. What about the coroner's own reasoning? Were there any elements that seemed speculative even to him, or at least to Campbell?
Oh, definitely. Campbell pointed out speculative findings by the coroner, like the idea that Phoebe dropped and broke a glass, cut herself, and put the fragments into a rubbish bag. Campbell stated there was simply no evidence for this narrative. No blood was found on the broken glass, and 2 other glasses found in the apartment weren't even fingerprinted.
So a narrative was sort of constructed without the supporting physical evidence.
That was Campbell's argument, yes. And the coroner's theory that still knocks and alcohol caused Phoebe to climb into the chute in an automatic state, that was also heavily criticized. Campbell stated Phoebe had taken still knocks before with no bizarre effects reported, and that such bizarre actions are generally not characteristic of zolpidem-induced sleepwalking. That usually involves normal activities like maybe walking or eating, but performed while asleep.
Right, not climbing into a garbage chute.
Exactly. Climbing into a garbage disposal hatch was certainly not a normal activity for Phoebe, or anyone, really. Campbell argued the coroner's positive finding here could only be speculation, which, challenges the very foundation of an inquest it's supposed to be based on evidence, not conjecture.
So what does this all mean for the legal process and the weight of the coroner's findings? It's clear that his conclusions clash significantly with other perspectives, especially the family's.
Indeed. And one of the most telling details, I think, is that counsel assisting the coroner, Deborah Siemensma, now she acts as the independent legal advisor, helping to guide the coroner on the evidence. She actually advised Coroner White that on the evidence before him could only return an open finding.
An open finding, meaning the cause of death couldn't be definitively determined.
Correct. She specifically advised against ruling on misadventure or on whether a third party was involved or exonerating Anthony Hampel. Yet the coroner, quote, deliberately flew in the face of this advice, making positive findings on those very points.
That's surprising. Why would a coroner ignore the advice of counsel assisting?
It's a very good question. And this particular detail isn't just procedural. It really challenges the very premise of the coroner's independence and the reliability of his findings when he seemingly chose to override expert legal guidance like that. Guidance designed to ensure impartiality.
And there were other, maybe seemingly small details that hinted at a different story. Things that didn't quite fit the accident narrative.
Yes, several. Phoebe's Prada sunglasses were found near her head on the compactor room floor, but she apparently only wore them outside.
Okay.
Her hair straightening irons were found plugged in the bathroom, which was described as unusual given Hampel's reputed fastidiousness.
Right, tidiness.
Exactly. And a mobile phone charger was in her bag with her keys, which suggests maybe she planned to be out and potentially away for some time. This seemed to contradict Hampel's claims about her phones and her state of mind.
Interesting little details. What about her clothing? Wasn't there something about that?
Yes, that's another significant point. When found, Phoebe's jeans were pulled down below her knees, they were undone at the waist, and her belt was only threaded through 2 of the 5 loops.
Okay. Yeah.
So if her jeans were in that position before she entered the chute, Campbell argued it would have been physically impossible for her to have climbed in by herself.
Ah, I see. Because her legs would have been hampered.
Exactly. This issue, Campbell noted, was not conclusively determined by the inquest. But it pointed again, in his view, to the possibility of another party being involved.
Ultimately, Lorne Campbell, drawing on his own experience as a retired police officer, he expressed profound disappointment, didn't he? Calling this a death which may have been a homicide, and lamenting the, quote, absurdity of the findings and by the shortcomings of the police.
Yes, he firmly believed that the evidence presented was only capable of justifying an open finding. Meaning, it wasn't shown to be more likely than not that it was an accident, which is the standard often applied in civil findings like an inquest.
And the family's fight for answers didn't end with the inquest, did it?
No, it continued. Phoebe's mother, Natalie, acknowledged the huge emotional and financial burden. They had used public donations to fund their legal representation during the inquest. She later donated the remaining funds, about $7,200, to the White Ribbon Foundation.
Connecting Phoebe's case to the broader issue of violence against women.
Exactly. She noted that intimate partner homicides account for about 1/5 of all homicides in Australia, and that 4 out of 5 of those involve a man killing his female partner. A stark statistic.
And the public concern sparked by the handling of the investigation, that led to more media attention, right?
It did. In 2016, the Age newspaper released a 6-part podcast series titled Phoebe's Fall, which examined the case in great detail. And in December 2016, a petition was launched to reopen the police investigation and continue the judicial inquiry into Phoebe's death. I believe it was aiming for 100 signatures initially to gain traction.
So the death of Phoebe Handsjuk remains, well, a profoundly unsettling case. Was it, as the coroner found, a tragic accident driven by intoxication and confusion? Or do the many unanswered questions and the very critical analysis from those closest to Phoebe point to something far more troubling?
This deep dive really highlights the crucial importance of a thorough and, frankly, unimpeachable investigation, especially when a death is suspicious. It forces us, and you listening, to ask critical questions about how evidence is collected, how it's interpreted, and how conclusions are drawn when so many inconsistencies and alternative possibilities remain on the table.
So, given the detailed arguments put forth by Phoebe's family, what responsibility do our institutions have? Especially when their official findings are based on what others, including legal counsel involved, contend is speculation, particularly when those findings effectively close the door on alternative explanations, like homicide. What does this case tell us about the search for truth when faced with complex information and, of course, deeply personal loss? Think about it and stay curious.